Making sense of family business. Let's talk about it.
Welcome to Making Sense of Family Business, where I explore some of the common causes of family business conflict and suggest some strategies and solutions for dealing with them. I'm John Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist based in Melbourne, Australia. Today I'm going to be talking about collaboration and teamwork. Two concepts that sound natural and obvious enough, but their absence causes huge problems for and conflicts in business families all over the world. I'm going to explain why and what you can do about it. So let's get into it. Let's kick off with a couple of definitions just so that we can be clear we're talking about the same thing. Collaboration is the willingness to work with others to achieve shared goals. It's a cerebral thing or it's an emotional thing. It's not yet a doing thing. It's a willingness, it's an attitude if you like. And it's essential if you're going to have a high-performing team in these days of collaborative effort. Teamwork, on the other hand, is the actual doing. It's the working with others collaboratively, one hopes, to achieve the shared goals we were just talking about, to overcome particular tasks and obstructions and so on, and to achieve outputs that everyone thinks are a good idea. Now, in a team, we want everybody to have complementary roles and responsibilities. Collaboration as an attitude isn't quite so specific, but it obviously benefits from having diversity of input. Collaboration and teamwork seem to come naturally to new family businesses because they are not really entirely commercial entities right from the very beginning. They are largely relationship entities, and people are involved in family businesses, or they come in to join other family members in family businesses in the early days, more for relationship purposes than for remuneration or contractual obligation or anything of that sort. And because it's personal commitment, they're often prepared to go above and beyond normal effort, which is why a lot of family businesses are really quite unstoppable, particularly during the forming and storming stages when they're getting going. They're a combination of relationships and personal commitments, and they tend to be unstoppable. The problem is they're not systemic, they're not accountable, there's no contract managing mutual obligations, and they are not necessarily performance-oriented either. There's an assumption that commitment to collaborate and work in a team and try to get good outcomes is there based on relationship expectations rather than anything more solid. And another thing that happens in this early stage, now remember we're talking about the forming and storming stage, the early stage of a business, is that the authority structures, the relationship hierarchies, the power formulas that apply in the family may well be imported into the business before the business has its own normal commercial systems, which tend to remove at least some of that individuality and create more of a standardization. So at this point in time, and when we start to talk about how it causes conflict, we'll go into this in a bit more detail. Things like reporting lines, which in most businesses are vertical or horizontal, look a lot more like a bowl of spaghetti because stuff goes wherever it's going to go. If those sorts of things are still in place and the business continues to grow and it outgrows the ability to operate on a relationship-only basis, you're going to see certain symptoms that indicate there is a problem which may eventually turn into a conflict. The first of those is going to be emotional leakage. And this is where we see tensions that are clearly family-based and should have been kept in the family coming into the workplace and infecting the business. So this is where a normal conversation about, say, getting a job done or a performance feedback review or something of that sort is not taken as an objective effort to achieve business efficiency. It's taken as a personal affront and often as a continuation of a behaviour which has caused a lot of angst, sometimes for a great many years. Another thing we might see is a loss of direction. The vision is in the owner's head, but there is no systematic communication process to share it with everybody else. The owner is now getting distracted because they can't be across everything because the business is growing too big for them. And nobody else actually knows where the business is going. That creates fear, uncertainty, questions about, do I dare commit myself to this because I've got a family to feed? Those sorts of things become very, very relevant. As a consequence, decision paralysis becomes common. And this is where we end up with a business that often flips from being brutishly hurtle ahead at a breakneck speed to all systems stop, can't make a decision about anything to save its life, opportunities just fly past, and problems simply don't get resolved. Very hard to recruit good people at times like that, sometimes even harder to hold on to good people when the business gets into that sort of condition. There will be significant role confusion, which often leads to boundary trespassing within a family group, because family members come in as rescuers, try and help others out, but in that process they may be trampling into areas of authority that they just have no right to be in. They can simply see the need in the business for the sake of the family to do something, so they jump in. They don't have a corporate discipline that says, not your problem, this is not your area, let the system look after it. They just jump in. So from there it's not very far for the relationships to turn into politics and for the development of coalitions and cliques and power groups and all the rest of it, because different groups start to form up wanting to take control because we've now got a leadership vacuum. And that results in quite a lot of pot stirring, quite a lot of interference, quite a lot of manipulation, unilateral decisions, power grabs, all those sorts of things, which are typically going to destabilise the business in a pretty big way. And of course, when all the things that are happening go back in the family, it creates a lot of problems for people back in the family. When a business gets beyond its startup phase, when it has completed its forming and its storming just to get going, build momentum, get some customers, get some staff, get some cash flow, usually somewhere between, let's say, 2 to 5 mil turnover, and if it's been around for years and years and it still hasn't got to that level, it could be a lot sooner, the business will need to go through a process called norming. So it's formed, it has stormed, and now it's time for it to norm. And this is where it takes a deep breath and puts in systems and processes which are appropriate for a business that has now moved out of micro business mode and is into SME mode. It's a small business, but it's now a serious business with people, with complexities and so on, as opposed to being potentially a serious business a little while earlier. It's essential during the norming process to institute appropriate levels and systems of governance, because that is a system of management for the business. And when we have a system of management, we can start to, I wouldn't say institutionalize, but we can certainly start to normalize our expectations for collaboration, teamwork, how we do things around here, building a purposive culture, which is going to give business efficiency and resilience. The fundamental tension is between the family as an emotional system and the business as a performance system. And if family style is transferred into the business, that can be entirely counterproductive and certainly counter-commercial. So you could say that when a family member comes into a family business, there should be a personal perspective reset, but that doesn't really happen. And so often they just float, people come into the business and they assume the business will operate like the family because they're seeing the same people there. Now, a lot of these things will lead ultimately to conflict because people will only burn off so much rubber before the tyre bursts, they hit the rims and the sparks fly. So now let's explore some of the consequences of not having collaborative teamwork operating in a family business. What causes this to happen and why does it develop into conflict? And the first of these is the fact that a lot of family businesses, contrary to their expectations and intentions, are very low trust environments, not the sort of high trust that people naturally assume will come as a consequence of being family. The word family suggests nurture, care, and a high trust environment, great collaboration, good teamwork, everybody's there for everybody else. But an awful lot of businesses involving family are the very opposite. Now, this sort of makes my point about family business ultimately makes no sense because the family as a entity is a biological construct. It happens naturally because people beget people and become a family. They effectively collect members and nobody's got a choice about whether they're family or not family. I suppose you can divorce yourself from the family legally, but you're still biologically family members anyway, even if you really dislike them. But the family is formed through an inherited process. It gets its DNA, which link it to all of its ancestors since forever. Things like personality, in fair measure, 30 to 50% of it is genetics, are formed by your DNA. Your birth order is something you don't get to pick. It just happens as a consequence of when that lucky sperm happened to hit and make its mark. The family functions, not the family formation, not its actuality, but the way the family functions, has got more to do with circumstances. The dynamics that have developed in the family as a consequence of the personalities, the choices that people make, the culture that the family has built as a consequence of the effort that it's put into building culture. Now let's introduce the idea of design as well, because I'm going to make a point in a moment. The design is how you actually decide to utilise the resources you've got to deliver a final product, which is the way the family is going to function. So you can choose to a degree the values you're going to use. Some of those will be imposed on you by circumstances, some of them will be inherited, some of them would have been learnt, but there is then also during the process of personality formation some opportunity to choose your values, and of course you can act against your values and ignore your conscience that says, well, you're not actually behaving the way you'd like to be thinking you're behaving because you've chosen through financial, commercial, competitive imperative to go against your values and your principles and so on to do something in a certain way. Design also is about mindset. To some extent, we can choose the mindset we are going to have, the mindset we're going to be in, the mindset we're going to show the world, and the mindset we bring to work, the mindset we take to home, and so on. And I've done a whole other video on the whole concepts behind mindsets. Design also involves governance systems. What choices have we made to have a business that operates in a certain way or a family that operates in a certain way? Have we actually actively made decisions? In a lot of families, stuff just sort of happens. People float through. They don't realise necessarily that a lot of what they do is modelled on what their parents gave them. They may be doing something different. They may be doing something similar. They may be influenced by political parties, friendship groups, school groups, and so forth. But there are choices in there about how the family is going to function. So the outcomes, the way the family operates, which now comes back to, is it collaborative, does it work as an effective team, and so on, is a combination of what the family members have inherited by way of DNA, and natural shaping factors, and design. And those choices create divergences within the family, and those divergences can create conflict. And we could say that on the one hand, you'll end up with the romantics who believe that because it's family, it should be willing to be collaborative, be nurturing, be supportive, great teamwork and all the rest of it. And those groups do not want a lot of control, external control. They think things should work naturally. So they're romantics or naturalists, if you like. And they can find themselves in a very, very different space to the other group who we'll call the realists. And these are the ones that are less likely to rely on emotional controls and encouragements to be collaborative and to work in teams. And they are more realistic, or they think they're more realistic, about if we're going to do this for the next 20 years, we need to have some systems, incentives, rewards, discipline, motivation, supervision, feedback, skills, about all the rest of it. So we've got two. One might be a bit laissez-faire and the other one might be very driven to achieve a very specific sort of a result. We're now at the point where we talk about some strategies and solutions. We've talked about teamwork, we've talked about the ways that lack of focus, lack of effort, lack of support for creating collaborative attitudes and supporting collaborative teams can ultimately lead to low efficiency and even conflict in a family business. What can we do to prevent that from happening? What can we do to address it if it has happened? I guess the first point to take away from here is that before collaboration becomes a skill, it has to be adopted as a value. So collaboration must be a value before it becomes a skill, and ideally it's an attitude and a value that is learned during childhood when you're talking about sharing your toys before you can even walk. In the very early days, if you look at small kids playing, they're not necessarily selfish when they protect their toys against others. What they are doing is displaying the fact they haven't learnt the social skills of sharing because they haven't learnt the benefits and they haven't necessarily been trained into the idea that by sharing we'll have more harmony, we'll have more fun, and we actually get to play with twice as many toys if we're sharing in two directions with somebody else. You could summarise this by saying if the family builds a culture and a concept of we before me, in other words, it always questions and it always promotes the idea of this is for everybody rather than just for you or for me. If that becomes a lived family value, it is something that develops as part of the culture, and if those small children now in future years are going to work together, or work with anybody for that matter, if they have that idea of let's collaborate, let's work as teams, let's try to get good outcomes for everyone, they're going to find it much, much easier to get along with and to work with other people than those who have been brought up to believe that knock-down, drop-dead competition is a really admirable way to go, which is what they might get from a driven entrepreneur who really doesn't seem to be much concerned about anything other than making money. You can train kids with age-appropriate tasks, and one of the things that perhaps came as a bit of a surprise to me and probably shouldn't have done is how easily even very small kids can be excited and committed to adult activities provided they are reasonably age-appropriate and they are being conducted with people who they actually want to spend some time with. So this then flows into, if you like, the style of parenting. Is it going to be a responsibility-based style of parenting or a competency-based style of parenting? Or instead of that, are we going to have hyper-protective parenting? Now, if we're looking at responsibility and competencies, we are going to build resilience in the child. If we are going to overprotect, it follows logically The child doesn't get a chance to stand on their own 2 feet, doesn't learn what the boundaries are, doesn't learn so much about how to solve problems, and is likely to have far less resilience in later life because it's always looking to be protected rather than having to work out how do I get myself away from this sharp spear that's coming towards me. And we can teach this responsibility and so on to small kids by giving them family projects, organising the vegetables for a picnic, deciding what drinks we're going to have, where are we going for the afternoon walk, that type of thing. Simple little things which seem insignificant but that nevertheless build a personality and a psyche. We talked earlier on about building the family culture, and if what we model within the family is support for empathic behaviours and emotionally intelligent responses as a way of building and strengthening relationships, if we teach kids that, and these can be learned skills again at an early age, these children are going to have a huge advantage over others further down the track. They're going to be better at collaborating, better at working with teams. In all likelihood, they'll be better managers and better leaders when it's their turn. We should always acknowledge and deal with emotional issues. I've talked in various other episodes about things like the emotional baggage that people can carry around with them from decades, and it gives them a seriously miserable life. In many cases, that's because they simply haven't confronted emotional traumas that overwhelmed them at an earlier age, and so they're carrying it around with them. They've got a form of PTSD, effectively. Whereas if they acknowledged their emotions, if they surfaced those items that are deep buried and causing them problems, if they dealt with them openly and collaboratively with others, took some different perspectives, made some different decisions, they won't change the past, but they can at least change their perspective on the past, and they may no longer be prisoner to the past. And that's what a lot of PTSD treatments do as well. They try to help people deal with stuff so they don't wake up screaming in the night. Tied in with that is things like perspective switching, seeing and feeling through others' eyes, which links in with the empathy thing we were talking about a little earlier on. Now, all of this needs to be done on an ad hoc basis and a systematic basis and a regular basis. And the regular basis means you want to have regular family meetings where all of these values and all these processes and so on are endorsed, re-endorsed, discussed, reproven and recommitted to. So in closing, the points that I've been trying to make today are collaboration and teamwork don't happen by accident. There needs to be an intent, there needs to be a design, there needs to be a commitment to putting into practice what people have talked about doing, and there needs to be reviews and feedback and reinforcement. And then they become real, then they become admirable, then they become baked in. Hope is not a strategy. When families simply hope that things will work out okay, they are destined for a lot of pain somewhere down the track in all likelihood. Maybe not for a long time, but almost certainly it's going to happen. Whereas if we move away from hope to the concept of design, we look at an emphasis on capability and resilience and sustainability, and if these become conscious goals for the whole family group, they can build plans, they can build commitments, and they can review their progress. So they're far more likely to achieve a good outcome than just by sitting back and hoping for the best. I'll leave you with this thought. Strong families don't just love each other. If they are business families, they will love working together and playing together, socialising. If family members can only put up with each other in the workplace or in the family, you've got a problem, and they probably should not, without further work at least, be forced to work together in the business where they would not naturally choose to be because of the nature of their relationship. I do hope you found this useful, and if you have, please subscribe because there's lots more to come. Please give us a like, please let others know we're here, and all the best to you with your family business endeavours. From John Camfield, the Family Business Solutionist, thanks for watching.